Okay, like I said, we do a to-do list today as an exercise for this introduction to React.js, a library that we use to build front-end user interfaces. Here's the wireframe. Again, just a simple text box. We can type something to do, click add, and then a bullet point list in the bottom here. So let's get to it. In your CodeSandbox environment, if you go to codesandbox.io, the link I posted in the Zoom chat, /s/react-new, you should have this environment here after you fork in the top right. There's a directory called src and then /app.js. We're interested only in this one. So what happens here, we have the code in the middle, and then the right-hand side is the manifestation of this code. It's like a mini web browser within the whole browser here. So you can refresh and do things. So as you change the code here, for example, I send 1, 2, 3 to this, it will appear here. Okay, so the way everything's set up here in React is pretty simple. So we have a public /index.html page, and this page in the body, there's a div element whose ID attribute is root. So the whole React application is injected here. How does it work to inject? Well, the file src/index will have some document get element by ID root, meaning it's going to find that element. And then finally, it's going to render the React application at that element. This is not necessary. You don't have to understand this, what's going on right now. But that's how the mechanism works to inject the React application. Now, going back to src/app.js, let's get going doing this to-do list. So let's start off with just have these text box, right? How can we build that? So in React, we build things with components. So a component in its most basic form is just a function, and you give it a name. For example, this is the app component. Now, the component has to return something, and that's the view. That's what we're going to see. So you return for this function something that looks like HTML, but it's actually what's called JSX. Basically, it's syntactic sugar for a function call in JavaScript, and the function is react.createElement. But writing the code with react.createElement is just too hard to see. So we prefer writing it the declarative way, syntactic sugar with JSX. It looks just like HTML, pretty much HTML written within JavaScript code. And then you can just write this right here, and it will appear here in the browser, just like that. So if you do any change like I did here, let me remove the 1, 2, 3, it will appear on the right-hand side as so. Okay, let's just remove everything and just have a div there. So let's get started. What's the element we're going to use to make a text box? Well, it's going to be the input, just like HTML, right? So in HTML world, we have the input element with this input tag, right? Now in the React world, it's the same thing, except we use different terminology. When you say element in HTML world, in React world, we say component. When we say attribute, like the type attribute of the input type text, in React world, that's called a prop, which is short for property. So let's do this here. Now, React requires you, when you have a self-closing tag, to add a slash before the greater than. Otherwise, it doesn't work. You know, in HTML5, you don't need to add a slash, but in React, we have to do a slash there. Now you can see there's a text box there. Now let's add the button to add the to-do. I'm just going to break a new line, add button, type button, and I'm going to say add, and then close that. So in this case, we have a button component with the type prop set to button. Now, what's between the open and close tag? In React world, we call this the children prop. It's a special kind of prop that you can place instead of placing here. You can place it between the open and closing tags. Okay. Now let's make this style a little better. I think I want the input to take over the whole line and add some padding to the button. So let's add a container here. And this container div will contain the input and the button. And then we add a class. Now, to add a class in React world, you have to be careful. You should use className instead of class. In HTML, we have the class attribute, but in React, we have className. Why is that? Well, because React originally, we used to write components using class keyword, object-oriented programming. So it's more encouraged to use just functions now, but the reason we don't use class here and instead use class name is because class is a keyword in the JavaScript language that's used to create a blueprint for objects. Anyway, let's call this the to do input container. How about that? So we got this class. Now, where do we set the styles? Well, the styles will be in the file styles.css here, but notice there's an import at the top for /, which means current directory, the file styles.css. So when this is done, it will import the styles from this CSS. So I can just go here and say the class name that I did here. So I'm just going to copy that. Make sure there's a dot before it because it's a class. So I just want to make the text input kind of expand and push the button all the way to the right. To do that, I can set this container to be display flex. Like this. I can press Control S in my case, Windows, to save this. And nothing's going to happen yet because I got to set the flex number for this input. So I'm going to add a class to that input. So class name, remember, you have to have name. And this is going to be, let's say, to do input, just like that. Now I'm going to go back to styles.css, to do input. I want this to have flex property, :1, so that it will expand and push everything next to it all the way to the end of the line. Okay, if you want to add more stuff to make this prettier, feel free to do so. Maybe add some padding, like 8 pixels, like that. Maybe you can change other stuff. That seems okay to me as it is. Now for that button add, I want to add some padding to the left and right to make it, occupy more space. So let me say add button class here. And I want to add some padding to top and then to left and right. Top bottom, I want to be maybe 8. And then space 16 pixels for left and right. Now I need to add this class, apply that to the button. So I'm going to say class name there, line 8, add button. And there's some space now to the left, to the right, and then some in the top bottom. Although I kind of stretch the input, so it might not have any effect. In any case, it looks good to me. Now let's do the following. So we want to have the to-do list right after that, right? We have to have, here's the wireframe again. So we just added the text input, the add button. Now we have some bullet points for each to do. Well, that's easy. You could just do a UL, right? Unordered list with some LIs. But well, that's going to be dynamic because we want to click add and keep adding stuff. But for now, we can just fake some stuff. So we have kind of a placeholder there. So right here, I'm going to add a UL. And I don't have anything yet, so just create some fake to-dos here. Maybe just like what we had. Do the laundry, walk the dog. Do the laundry, the first LI. And then the second LI is walk the dog. Okay, maybe you can increase the font size. I don't know if you can see. Let me know if it's too small. Let me add a class to the UL. To-do list. And I'll add some font size there to make it bigger for you. To-do list, back in styles.css. And I'll increase font size maybe, let's see if it's 16, 24, about that. There you go. You can change it to whatever you want, okay? I just changed it so it's easier for you.